Badala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dino Badala Show. We're live Wednesday, October 2nd, in studio with our friend Jamira Burley, back, internationally recognized speaker, social justice advocate, next-gen social impact and consultant. You got a lot of stuff. Director at Hillary for America. Jamira, how are you, my friend? How are things? How's life?
You know, life is crazy. Life is great. My personal, what's happening everywhere else.
I agree with you. And that's there are so many people who call up and I go, how are you? And they go, well, considering I'm okay. And don't talk about such as kids locked in cages, such as our government took children away from parents and have not returned them because they have no idea where the parents are. So those kids might not be in cages, but they're not with their parents. They're somewhere in a foster care system. No one even knows. Right. No one knows. And then you've got the DACA kids who are here all their life just about, and they're still in limbo because in the courts, there's so much we can't cover.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the insanity of just what's just happened. I mean, today, I love the fact that Trump Meltdown, hashtag Trump Meltdown, was trending for, it's still up there now for part of the day, but it was number one. And, you know, you like Twitter. I mean, I don't know if I would have been suspended, but Trump gets away with it. But going after Adam Schiff as low, you know, the guy is low life and garbage and treason. And then he goes after Schiff in the real world. I'll just play the shorter version of it. Here's clip number 8, Trump talking about Schiff today.
The Adam Schiff version where he made up my conversation. He actually made it up. It should be criminal. It should be treasonous. He made it up, every word of it, made up, and read to Congress as though I said it. And I'll tell you what, he should be forced to resign from Congress. Adam Schiff, he's a lowlife. He should be forced to resign.
And that's the guy who's president, by the way. And so let me just ask you, first of all, sincerely, do you take any joy or glee in watching Trump freak out like this at all? Or is it overshadowed by your concern about where we're going as a country? Or can you compartmentalize where we're going and actually enjoy for a moment just the pure freak out of it?
Somehow work out, right? The whistleblower finds a way to make his report. And then I'm like, okay, so all is not lost with this thing that we're calling the world right now. But then at the same time, to your point, it's hard to fully enjoy those moments when we know that he is still president. He is still making decisions that impacts every one of our lives. And also, we oftentimes, as American voters, we forget the image that we have to portray in our partners around the world. And what does that look like for individuals who have to, you know, take our word or see us as an ally? How are they also... So the leader of Finland, is he the prime minister or the president of Finland?
He runs Finland. That's all I know.
He's the head man in charge
of the Finnish cheese, vodka, herring thing. I don't know, but he's in charge of Finland.
In the course of his opening statement, he says something to the extent of, "I went to a number of museums because I have free time when I got to the U.S." And he said, "I went to the African American Museum. I went to the Museum of History." And then he looked at Trump and he said, "You have a great democracy here. Keep it up." And it was so subtle shade. He was trolling him standing right next to him. It was amazing.
Like Speaker Pelosi keeps quoting Benjamin Franklin's famous line about it's a democracy if you can keep it. And so and she just said that earlier today, again at her press conference.
And he said, keep it up.
And I wonder if that was his way, like if you can keep it as Ben Franklin. It's interesting to see. Look, I on Twitter, I've tweeted a few times things like, is anyone else enjoying as much as I am Trump's freaking out? Hashtag asking for a friend. And it blows up every time I do it. And I feel guilty because I know it's going to work every time. It's like red meat for progressive. They all retweet it. And so I'm like, it's fun. But the reason it's fun is not because he's a Republican. It's because he's an asshole. And he's a bigot and a racist and sexist. So he has caused so much suffering through his cruelty among my community, your community, women. So many communities have suffered a real pain from him that I enjoy that. If it was Bush, I would not. If Bush was president, I just disagreed on policy.
Yeah.
It would not be the same. I would not. I'm not about cruelty. I don't enjoy being cruel. With Trump, I do.
Well, that's the funny part. I was having a conversation with someone. I went on a Tinder date very
Really?
recently. No, it was a Bumble date.
Right before the show?
No. We went to coffee
swiping
right
during the show.
So I went on a date, and I didn't realize that this guy was like a black Republican. What? And to the course of midway through the date, and I said something to the extent, I was like, I would never date a Trump Republican. And he was like, well, I think that's stupid to say. I was like, no. I was like, if we're talking about the Bush era, if we're talking about any other Republican era, it would be a differentiation on politics, right? It wouldn't be a difference on morality. And I think anyone who can adequately say that they are a Trump supporter, I don't know. We don't share the same values. We don't respect the same people. No, I wouldn't date
And what
you.
happened? Was he a Trumper?
He was a Trumper.
He was. So if the polls are correct, you met a unicorn because he's
a fool.
Right, because if like only about 10% they say of African Americans approve of his job, but of millennials it's even less. So you met a rare in New York.
In New York.
That's like you should play the lottery.
In New York.
I mean,
was
you're
like,
going to
good
win the
thing
lottery.
you're not in a state that your vote actually matters. He didn't take too kindly to
Boom.
that, but
Did you hang out at
I
all? Did
digress.
you find any kind of
yeah,
common
let him
ground?
pay for the check. Of course, that's the least I can let the Trump administration do.
As a good progressive, I'm going to show you that's so funny. Like my fiance, if she's not progressive enough, sometimes we have fun. I'm like, that's just, you're ridiculous. You're clearly not woke enough. And it's funny because I would think, objectively speaking, my fiance is she's a progressive, but I'm like a crazy progressive.
Yeah, and she's more chill.
And she's like normal. She's also an immigrant, so she views things a little differently. Like she never gets. It's very interesting, and I made this point in articles and on this show in the past and on TV. Our sense of what's like, I don't even want to use the term PC, but whatever is sensitive or respectful of others about race or ethnicity is very unique to the United States of America.
Very.
Our perception of race is unique. So she'll say there was something with a comedian saying things. She goes, why is that even a big deal? And I have to explain the history of some of the words. And she goes, oh, I didn't know that. Of course you didn't. So
Yeah.
when I was in the Middle East doing comedy, and we were not doing racist things, but if you were playing on a racial stereotype, you realize instantly it's an American racial stereotype because they didn't laugh at all. And you're like, the first few times you go, they're like, why aren't they laughing? And they're like, why do you say, I'll say, why is that? I've just talked to friends like, and they'll ask question like, why does a comedian say this about that group? I'm like, that doesn't resonate? Like, no. And they have their own racial stereotypes about other communities who are their workers in a way. That's a lot of who it is. So it's very interesting. So I don't get mad at her. I'm just like, what's wrong with you?
Wake up.
Well, there are times too when she doesn't like. I'm like, you don't get that because you're an immigrant, and she's like, what? It's like a joke I've written. I'm like, if you were born in this country, you would know I'm funnier. This is the kind of running.
Wait, you tell her you are funnier than
No,
she
I would be
thinks you
funny.
are?
No, I said I'm funny. I'm like, I will write a joke, especially when I used to do comedy full time. I'm like, what do you think is a joke? She goes, I don't get it. I'm like, that's because you're not. Because I'm just annoyed. Not because it's true. I'm like, if you were born in this country, you'd see the genius that you're living with. And
It makes me think of this internship I did in high school. There was a few black interns, and then there was one white intern, my friend Matt, and he did something, or he didn't laugh at a joke that one of the adults had said, and she turned to him and was like, it's because you're white. It's because you're white.
That's
And I
funny.
remember all of us just dying
that's very funny. That is very.
because some people just don't get it.
Well, let's talk about millennials. You are an expert. You speak
I
for all
am.
millennials. Jamira speaks for all millennials, all blacks, all women.
All women,
An intersection of all three at the same time.
all heterosexuals,
Right, so
all
I-
cis people.
all cisgender. So what I like here is this, and I'm not surprised by it, but I'm surprised it took this long to get the uptick. New CNN poll shows 60% of those under 35 now support impeachment, which is now one of the biggest demographics. Is old, middle age, and older are around 40, 42, 43%. And they've not moved up much. The biggest move is among millennials. So I would think there's a lot of people who are middle-aged and older who listen, don't think millennials are paying attention. Clearly, they're paying a lot of attention.
Oh, I totally think they're paying attention. I mean, if I look at my group chat, right, I'm definitely the most politically engaged, involved, either have worked on or just aware than my friends, but we can go from talking about something very pop culture to talking about Trump or something involved in the Trump investigation. So I think the misconception that millennials don't care clearly show that they're not on Twitter, they're not on Instagram, because folks are talking about it in very serious ways and are able to draw parallels with the historical context in which we sit in. Yeah, I think I would definitely say my generation is much more aware of what's happening. And I also think that the reason why they're probably moving is that they're much more hopeful of what is possible versus past generations have seen this happen over and over again, and they don't believe that the system is going to work.
And among all the demographics of disapproval of Trump, younger people, I don't even know if they're millennials, but it's
Probably Gen Zers.
It's,
Yeah, that's millennials.
And the 34 has the smallest approval rating of Trump, yet that's also the group that tends not to vote as much. And I kept saying, if you know anyone young, you got to get them registered because it's very likely they're going to vote against Trump if for the Democrat. Not definite, but more likely. When we've talked about we have not covered the 2020 Democrats in now like a week and a half because this is just sucked up the air.
Yeah.
We talked. You told me about things like for yourself, and it was also Danielle Moody Mills and Aisha Moody Mills, who would speak so warmly of Liz Warren. Didn't say they were going to support her, but they liked her so much. And I would be on cable news stuff with other people. And they're like, well, Liz Warren has no support among the black community. I'm like, that's not what I'm getting from various people. And finally, the polling began to catch up.
I was about to say, if you look on Twitter, all of the people tweeting about Elizabeth Warren are most of the time young black people, and oftentimes it's young black men, which is
That's interesting.
Which is a very different contrast to what I saw for Hillary. So I find that hard to believe.
But I think because they're not caught up in the polling yet, if they're younger, just cell phones, all of that. And I would say
I've never got a poll question. I've never got anyone call me for a poll.
I've never in my life.
Call me. I'm available.
Jamira, there should be Tinder polling.
No.
Okay.
I mean, that actually might be a great way to grab millennials on the dating sites that they're like apps that they're already on, right?
There was a guy who ran for Congress in New York last cycle. He ran against Carolyn Maloney, Suraj Patel, who was a younger guy of color who used Tinder. And but it seemed like he may have been using it to get dates at the same time.
Oh, that's
but they were doing it, but they were swiping just to give information about the campaign to people. And he lost badly. And I wonder if you're really on Tinder to find a date and someone is sending you, it becomes spam. I mean, they really are sending you spam. Well, no, it's not a date. It's about information of a candidate.
Well, ironically enough, Bumble just did an entire campaign working with women organizations, identifying women leaders around the world. And you can decide as you're swiping if you want to support that particular organization, and they would donate money. So
that's different.
Now, but I think it's still information. I think it's a way in which how we present that information. So maybe people don't want to know specifically about that candidate, but they might want to know about the policy. They might want to know about their strategy regarding this A, B, or C. And so I think it's just a way of how we present the information that might actually activate folks.
So I can tell, like my fiance, look, no, I'm on Tinder because
no,
of the politics.
don't tell your fiance.
I'm there
don't
to
tell her
learn
that
about
I told
political
you.
issues.
Because when she cuts you, I don't want no part of this. Okay.
I swiped right because I'm trying to learn about this campaign. Is it not? Like I have to meet with a person now.
It sounds like Stacey Dash's husband.
Stacey Dash, who she's from
apparently
Jersey.
is a white woman.
She's a white woman?
Did you see her arrest warrant? It says she's a white woman.
Oh, I didn't know that. She's from Paramus, where I grew up.
I know. So
and she went to Paramus. No, my sister knew her though. And
was she white then too?
Well, I think growing up in Paramus, she probably was. I don't know. There were not many people of color in Paramus. Like we were, but we were I was still in my white stage then.
Oh, that's right.
And there were some brown people, some Indian and brown people. There were not many black families in Paramus growing up. But Stacey Dash was there, but we didn't know she wasn't famous. She was a kid who went to school. My sister was friends with her. So it's so sad to see her go to the Trump side, and then
she drank the Kool-Aid.
Have this. So let's talk about the polls now, just briefly, folks, because we have not been covering them at all. We were trying to cover it once a week or have guests on it. Everyone we're talking about, and the national polls right now, folks. This might shock some of you if you've not had time to follow it. Real Clear Politics average right now. Do you know what the Biden lead is over Warren right now in the average, national average,
no,
not state by state? It's only 4.
Oh, good.
On the national level.
Which actually might be higher because 5 points is the margin of error.
Right. It could be either way. They could be tied. But it's remarkable. This has slowly happened while we're talking about everything else. And Biden hasn't really gone down. It's not like this Trump stuff. I was looking at the polls more to see if this Trump stuff would affect Democrats. And clearly it's not. His numbers, Warren has gone up. But I will say this. In Iowa, Warren is leading by a few points. It's margin of error. Sanders close by. Everyone else way, way down. Buttigieg is next, but not even close. New Hampshire, Warren slightly up, but it's almost margin of error. South Carolina, where 60% of the electorate is black, Biden's up today by over 20 points. Over 20 points.
I don't get it.
Well, I mean, I'm looking to you to help us get it. I mean, is it the traditional wisdom that it's because he was the vice VP for Obama, or he's just a known commodity, or is it what Joy Reid told me about for black people? Our voting for us is so important. We're not going to throw our vote away, and they think Biden's the person who could actually beat Trump, and that's still their way. The same way Obama did not get support till he won Iowa. It needed white people to validate him in Iowa for African Americans. That's just a different time. No one thought there'd be a black president then. I mean, Hillary was running too. Everyone thought Hillary's going to be the nominee. Big deal. I mean,
I think it's the generational divide. I do. And I think that a lot of folks are looking for a safe bet. But there is no one who is talking about enthusiasm. Like, I don't see any enthusiasm for Biden. And I said this a few weeks ago when we did talk about, maybe it was a few months ago, when we did talk about Biden, is that I thought he had reached the ceiling. And I still think he has reached the ceiling. I don't think he's going to go up. I think, if anything, he's going to slowly go down, where people are going to continue to eat at the margins, because he isn't exciting. He isn't pushing out any new strategies. He isn't talking about any new policies that he's trying to put forth. All he's doing is riding on the coattails of Barack Obama, while also not wanting to take responsibility for anything Barack Obama did wrong. And so it's annoying, it's frustrating, and for me as a young person, I just feel like, we're not trying to throw our vote away, but we're also saying we deserve something more, and Biden is just not the president of this era for us.
And by the way, Bernie Sanders, if you don't know, today he took a break from the campaign trail. He had heart issue, actually artery issues, not heart. His arteries were clogged, and they had to put 2 stents in. And if everything goes well, it's not, you don't even get put to sleep for it. I mean, he could be back on the campaign trail in a week or maybe 2 weeks. Just give him time, because he's always out there running around. I imagine he'll be back for the next.
Those Popeyes chicken sandwiches.
That's what he's eating?
No, I'm joking.
High with sodium. Sodium is deadly. People know. If you have any blood pressure issues, which Trump has given me, sodium, the enemy, the devil.
But it's a reminder that the campaign trail is like very exhausting, right? And the physical, mental labor you have to put out, especially for someone of his age. And this is the second time he's done it in such a short amount of time. It's
interesting, too, that when you look at the polling now, there are so many candidates that I kept thinking, this is their moment. They're going to get traction. Mm-hmm. Senator Harris had the closest moment. She went up, she went down. And what she came down to, though, was higher, that she started from the spike. So she's still in there. She's clearly second tier with Buttigieg and stuff. Mm-hmm. But there have been so many times, like Cory Booker would do something. I'm like, he's going to finally move up.
You thought Cory was going to move up to where?
Because I'm from Jersey, and I've seen this guy forever, and I think he's really an impressive guy.
I guess.
But nothing. Then Julian, forget what Julian did with Biden at the last debate. There were so many times I'm like, this is going to be Castro's moment, not to be a front runner, to get to that second middle tier. Mm-hmm. Nothing. While polls show they're not stuck on any one candidate, they're pretty clear within the top 3. Everyone's there, a little for Harris, a little for Buttigieg.
Yeah.
Then it's just nothingness. It's like 2 points, Steyer at 2, Booker at 1 or 2, Yang at 2 or 3. Gabbard in a few of the early states now, she's up to 3 or 4 in New Hampshire. It's kind of surprising. So, I mean, are you surprised that we didn't have, like, the Republicans last cycle, 2016? It was in the early part. It was like different people led for different. Jeb Bush at first, Ben Carson, then Trump. Then Trump sort of kept it for a while, but it was close. With this, it's been Biden from the top, Warren slowly. It's not been flavor of the day. Slowly catching up. Bernie kind of staying where he is, and nobody else moving up. And we've had a bunch of debates now. Do you think anything's going to change?
I don't think so. I think the top 4 candidates are going to be the top 4 candidates. It's so funny. I just saw SNL from last week.
I know. I wish I had the clips. It was such great stuff.
So good. Check me out on no. But what I will say, I think the top 4 candidates are definitely going to stay the top 4 candidates. I think the difference is going to come when people start dropping out of the race, because I think for instance, there's still a lot of supporters for Andrew Yang, and I'm just like, why? I mean, he seems nice, but like he doesn't have any range to be president. Maybe go work in commerce, something, but I don't think he should. And he's raising a lot of money, right? A lot of these folks that are still at 2-3% are raising a lot of money and still have a large support. And so I think the numbers are going to change once folks hopefully get out of the race. I'm still hoping that the Democratic Party goes into a back room, make a decision, and come out as a strong team. Oh my God,
you can't do that. Let's get out of here. You want to go back to the old days?
I'm not trying to get back to the old days, but I also don't want Trump to have 4 more years. I'm being also very realistic. Different. But I'm also a person that's saying Biden is not my number 1. He's actually not within my top 3.
And by the way, and again, this is just, I always say look at trends in polls, but the trends show Warren catching up on Biden. And today, Monmouth University poll came out, and its methodology per 538, and I always look at that one, is A+. And this brand new poll, it got no press because everything's about Trump. In this new poll, Warren is beating Biden by 3. Now, again, this is one poll, but this is close to everything else, because the other one I told you, even before factoring this in, the lead was 4 points. That was margin of error. So they were about tied.
And the electability, right? People kept saying that the reason why they were supporting Biden is because he seemed the most electable. But there was a poll not that long ago that actually showed the top 4 candidates being able to beat Trump. So electability is not our problem here.
Well, so let's take a break. Come back with more of our friend Jamira Burley right after this. At this point, the question is not who connected to Donald Trump as a criminal. The question is anyone connected to Donald Trump who's not a criminal?
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
Sirius XM Progress.
Back to the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress.
And welcome back. We're here live with Jamira Burley, who all next week, catch her in the morning, hosting 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. on this very channel. SiriusXM presents Jamira Burley, and she's right here. So, Jamira, let's talk about the Amber Geiger case. And today, last night we covered the case a little bit. The facts, I think everyone knows the facts, that she was an off-duty police officer, walked into an apartment that wasn't hers, same building, different floor, saw a man in it, saw a silhouette, told him to freeze, and then shot him and killed him right there. The guy was eating ice cream. Of course, he was unarmed. He's sitting in his apartment. He's killed. She's convicted yesterday. Sentenced today to 10 years in prison. What's your reaction to 10 years in prison for taking a man's life who's sitting there watching television?
Well, first of all, I am very shocked that she got convicted, especially in Dallas, especially after the judge allowed the jury to consider a stand your ground. As a part of
the Castle Doctrine, which is the same same thing,
which is bullshit. Because how are you standing your ground and you are the threatening force in someone else's home? So I was very surprised that she was convicted, and I also think 10 years is a cop out. To your point earlier, she's not going to serve. She probably won't serve 10 years, and it's not for us. That's not justice, right? Someone is dead. A family lost their son, and all she got was 10 years that she may not even serve the full time for, and a slap on the wrist. And for all we know, the police force might hire her as soon as she gets back out.
I hope not. I mean, the brother of who was killed, the brother today said, I know I speak for myself. I forgive you. Brandt Jean said, I know if you go to God and ask him, he will forgive you. And that level of forgiveness, I have to be honest. Look, Maybe because I'm half Sicilian, which we're all about revenge and vendetta. I'd be like, yeah, I forgive you. And then I make a call. Does anyone know anyone in the prison she's going to be in? Because we're going to get somebody to get this person. If you killed my sister or my mom or my father or something, a loved one, in the way this, and then I know she didn't look for him. She didn't gun him down like intentionally in that she went to go kill him. She did kill him. I could not forgive him. Could you forgive like this?
No, and also I think that even if we don't know all her actions leading up to it, we know her actions after. And for me, her actions clearly displayed that this black man's life didn't matter. She did not try CPR. While she instead of calling the police, she was texting her partner who she was having an affair with, a married man. And she was more worried about losing her job than saving this man who she shot mistakenly in his own apartment. So for me, no, I don't have, at least not now, I don't have any forgiveness for you. And also my forgiveness, even if I forgave you, that doesn't mean I'm going to show you sympathy to the point where I'm going to hug you in court and feel sorry for you, because there is no there. I mean, I'm not half black. I am black, so we also are about revenge. But it took me a while to forgive the person who murdered my brother, and I don't know if it would take me that longer to forgive a person who I feel like I paid my tax dollars to serve and protect me, and this is how you treat me.
Did you, I mean, when we've talked about it before with what happened in your family, did you truly forgive the person who killed your brother?
Yeah, I forgave him because I mean, this is also was another young man of color, and I realized that what drove him to make that decision was not always his fault, right? It was the circumstances in which he grew up. That's me now learning about what real social justice is and about community conditions and what drives people to this. It's not the same thing for a police officer, a white woman who grew up in a very privileged world and who had the protection of her badge to stand behind. That's not the same thing for me.
So, I mean, the big message here, she got 10 years, but what they're saying is the life of an unarmed black man sitting in his apartment doing nothing but eating ice cream and watching television is worth should probably serve 8 years. I mean, to be honest, I don't know in Texas.
I would be surprised if she serves 3.
Well, it all depends in Texas. I don't know the state laws about how much you have to serve. It can generally be, as a rule of thumb, 2/3 of that. But whatever it is, whenever she's eligible for parole, I would have to think that a life of a human being who's truly innocent and has done nothing has to be worth more than someone serving, say, 7 or 8 years in prison. I just don't see that, because she'll get out and live a life after this. She can move someplace else, do whatever she wants. People probably won't even remember it by the time she's out. And how could this be? And it's just this bigger sense of fairness and the sense of what our society, what message they're sending. Because you made a great point in the break. There are guys who've sold drugs who didn't kill anyone, who are in jail for much, much longer than this. And she took a life of an innocent person who was watching TV in their own apartment.
Yeah, and she unlike those guys who have their whole life ruined for selling weed, which has now become $1 billion industry by white men. Fun fact, she will not be judged for the rest of her life for this incident. Like it won't bear the same weight that it does for people of color. And so my frustration also too is that folks were like, oftentimes folks in these situations are like, see, this is why we need more black cops. This is why we need more black judges. This is why we need more black jurors. But it's hard for people of color, progressive people, to operate with progressive values in systems that are morally and systematically corrupt. It's hard for when the law itself doesn't lend to actually ensuring that justice is served, when the judge, who is a black woman, can still allow the doctrine to be considered in a case like this.
The Castle Doctrine.
Yeah.
Do you think, from your own experience, you've had a lot of interactions with our criminal justice system and working on restorative justice and in your own family as well. Do you think if there were more police officers of color, it could make a difference?
No. Until we fix the system itself, because we're talking about a system that still has quotas, still have practices and procedures, that even if we have people of color, and we've seen instances where there are people of color officers on the scene that still use excessive force, that still use their badge or stand behind their badge, because oftentimes those police officers have to appear to their coworkers, their partners, that they are down and they're not going to be rude by their race. There's actually a new film coming out that's about that very same issue, where a black woman is a police officer. She sees, I can't think of the name of it, but she sees an incident with like corrupt officers, and she films it with her body camera, and she's trying to make it back to the station to actually upload it. And the police are actually trying to kill her in that process, because you've been taught, because as a police officer, your duty is no longer to your race. It's to, or at least for people of color, it's to your brothers in arms, right? The people who wear blue.
Sure. That's, And interestingly, and I didn't know this in preparing for this segment today, I found an article from a few months ago on NBC. Since 2005, only 98 non-federal law enforcement officers have been arrested in connection with fatal on-duty shootings. And of that, only 35 were convicted. Only 35. But we do know if you're a black police officer, we saw that in Minnesota where Mohammed Noor, he was the first Somali-American police officer in Minneapolis Police Precinct. He shot an unarmed white woman, which it seemed, I couldn't understand why he shot her. I have no idea. So I have no problem with him being convicted, but it's remarkable. He's the first, only 35 police officers have been convicted since 2005, and the first black officer, Somali-American in Minneapolis, convicted right away. Done.
Oh yeah, his
Nothing.
partner threw him right under the bus. There was no blue code of silence. It's so funny. So when I worked for Amnesty, I led our police brutality and criminal justice reform portfolio, and we did a report called we did a 50-state report looking at the use of force in all 50 states. And what we found is that 49 of those states are actually in violation of human rights conditions and the use of force statutes by the human rights standards. So we actually, in many states, allow police officers to use deadly force in times where it's actually called for not to use deadly force. So again, it's the policies and practices that we allow for people to operate in that actually are not conducive to real justice.
And it's stunning to see how few police officers, and I'm not saying if they did nothing wrong, they should not be charged or convicted. But in the cases we've seen, how can only 35 since 2005? And you're like, what has happened?
We have police chiefs who are found by the FBI oftentimes for fabricating evidence, right? For falsely convicting and arresting folks, and nothing ever happens to them. So for us, people of color, we don't trust the system because it has never shown itself to work for us. And so if you look at Twitter, everyone, their first tweet is that they were very surprised that she was convicted.
And that's
Very
an interesting
surprised.
point. That because they expected, even though the man was in his own apartment, the fact that he was black and she was white, that she would walk. And
even the police were prepared for it. They were prepared for riots, depending on the verdict. So
when you see the history of this country, though, when you're a young black person growing up and you see the history of our country, where law enforcement for years, through not just now, obviously, for decades and decades and decades, where white police officers, not just in the South, but during Jim Crow very easily, just killing a black person, all white jury just acquits them, or they don't even get charged.
yeah.
It has to impact your sense of belonging and what your worth is in the view of this society as it is. But has it gotten better objectively when you look at things? You think it's better in any way?
I mean, well, that's what the whole Black Lives Matter movement is. And for those who are, clueless and think it's somehow anti-whiteness, Black Lives Matter.
Giuliani's called it racist.
Of course.
Inherently racist.
Yeah.
He said that.
Black Lives Matter wasn't to say that Black Lives matter more than anyone else's lives. It's to finally declare to the world that we also matter too. And that there needed to be a movement to recognize the laws, the practices in which our police officers operate in, our jurors operate in, our judges operate in, are inherently wrong, morally wrong, to the point where we don't receive justice if we are victims. We damn sure don't receive justice if we're a perpetrator, and oftentimes don't commit crimes that 10 years from now become very legal and people are making billions of dollars on. So I think to some extent it has gotten somewhat better, but also think to some extent it's gotten worse, right? We saw through what made a lot of white people very aware of racism in the 60s and the 70s is that they saw for the first time black and brown people being beaten on bridges on TV, right? It became mainstream. We now see folks who are being brutally killed by the police, where they're running away and being shot in the back, and the same sympathy isn't there, because I think we're now becoming immune to this. We're lacking the real sympathy that is required for us to respond accordingly, and I think people are becoming desensitized.
And when you mention the marijuana sales and that right now it's big, where it's legal, it's going to be bigger companies run essentially by white people. What's the reaction by young millennials of color to seeing this?
We're like, fuck y'all.
Really?
No, yeah, because it's like literally in states. I mean, there are some states that are being very proactive that are saying we are going to release anyone who who are trying to expunge those records of folks who were arrested for marijuana charges. But it's not taken into consideration what real healing and reconciliation is, right? So if you arrested a young man when he was 15 years old for a marijuana charge, he went to prison for a few months. Oftentimes they went to prison for a few years. He probably came out as a worse criminal than when he went in. Yep. He probably committed a worser crime than what he did originally. And so the domino effect that had on his entire life won't just vanish by removing that first charge, or it won't vanish the impact that it had on his family. And so it's not real healing and reconciliation, and it's not an opportunity for us to address the systematic ways in which this country has specific rules for white people and specific rules for blacks.
And it's such an important point you make, that if you can't go back in time. You can arrest one, say, conviction and expunge it, but the others that might be there, and it's that first conviction, the way that people are treated in our society, where they can't get jobs, or the big thing is not getting jobs at all, and the police treating them like garbage all the time. And then for some of them, like in the sense of the Central Park Five, one of them, and I can't remember his name, which one it was, who went on to commit another crime. He couldn't get a job anywhere, and it seemed like a snapshot of so many people who went through the system. They come out, they serve their time, but they're forever serving their time on some level.
Yeah, you're forever known as an ex-offender. Sometimes you're on parole for as long as you spent behind bars. So oftentimes you're never fully separated from the system. The system always has its hand on you.
So let's take a quick break. We'll come back with more of our friend Jamira Burley right after this.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
My slogan for Trump in 2020, Trump for prison 2020.
Sirius XM Progress. You're listening to The Dean Obeidallah Show, Sirius XM's Progress.
And welcome back, Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live Wednesday, October 2nd. In studio, Jamira Burley, who you can catch all week next week, hosting 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. on this very channel. So you worked for Hillary Clinton. Hillary was on with Colbert. And here's it's a short clip about what happened last night organically, 2 nights ago on Colbert.
Your fault for coming on Ukraine week. Now, we learned about the Trump-Ukraine call of the private server. Is it time to, dare I say, lock him up? What do you make of it? I created a monster.
Look, so that was at a comedy show, and it's fine, but I remember when Trump first talked about lock her up or even the criminality of his opponent in America, there was this instinctive reaction that, hey, we're America, we're not a banana republic. You don't talk about imprisoning your political opponents. And Trump unleashed that to the point where I gleefully would cheer, lock him up at a rally now. And yes, he's committed crimes, but I think before Trump, people would be, no Democrat would even entertain that. They go, we don't do that. That's not what this is about. Now, if a Democrat did that, and Trump has unleashed some of the worst, he's normalized the idea of just calling for the criminalization and imprisonment of your political opponents, which is not something we've done much in our country at all. In fact, that's why we've never had a former president in prison, even though when Nixon left office, I talked about this earlier in the week, almost 60% of Americans thought he should go to jail, which is stunning to look back there. But Gerald Ford pardoned him, so he didn't.
Which is bullshit.
Right, if he had not pardoned him and he went to jail, maybe Trump would not be doing what he did.
Because exactly, every time we don't hold folks accountable to the actual letter of the law that you hold every other American accountable for, if we don't hold these folks accountable, what stops the next person from doing worse, right? And that's what my problem with the Republicans totally overlooking Trump's behavior is that they set the precedent for the next person to do even, I mean, if Trump ever leaves the White House, because I still don't think he's going to leave willingly. If he ever leaves the White House, that the next person to come in is going to have a golden ticket to do whatever the hell they want. And what does that mean for the status of this democracy that we quote unquote have, this republic?
And this is today, Trump standing next to the president of Finland and not wanting to answer a question. First, he was asked the question and Trump kind of babbled, blah, blah, blah. And then Jim Acosta, you can hear Jim Acosta, because I know his voice, yelling out. And Trump actually entertains it and responds. And the actual reporter presses him like, I just want to know, what were you trying to get from the Ukraine president about the Bidens? And he won't answer that question because he knows it's a crime and he doesn't want to answer it. So here he is freaking out and saying he's standing next to the president from Finland. That's why he keeps going, why don't you ask him a question? Like, this is unreal. So here's clip number 3, please.
What do you want me to look into on Biden? Look, Biden and his son are stone cold crooked. And you know it. His son walks out with millions of dollars. The kid knows nothing. You know it, and so do we. Go ahead, ask a question.
The question, sir, was what did you want President Zelensky to do about Vice President Biden and his son Hunter?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, it was just a follow-up of what I just asked you, sir.
Listen, you ready? We have the president of Finland. Ask him a question.
I have one for him. I just wanted to follow up on the one that I asked you, which
did
was,
you hear
what
me?
Did you want
Did you
him
hear
to
me?
Yes,
ask
sir.
him a question.
I will, but
I'm giving you a long answer. Ask this gentleman a question. Don't be rude.
No, sir, I don't want to be rude. I just wanted you to have a chance to answer the question that I asked you.
I've answered everything. It's a whole hoax. And you know who's playing into the hoax? People like you and the fake news media that we have in this country. And I say in many cases, the corrupt media, because you're corrupt.
And live from New York, it's Saturday night. Like, this is, can you believe this is and the Republicans are silent about this man just not just freaking out, unhinged, meltdown.
But they're used to it. So is it really unhinged? Is it really a meltdown, or is it
this
just
seems
Trump?
a little bit slightly heightened. I mean, I feel he's looking at his political mortality in the face. Doesn't mean he'll definitely be removed, but he understands he is likely will only be the third president in our history impeached. And I think that bothers him right now for that sense. Instead of getting the Nobel Prize, he's going to get this.
I mean, this is a guy who stood next to a Nobel Prize winner who was a victim of sexual assault from gang rape in the Taliban. And instead of asking her about, who had her whole family brutally murdered and had his whole, and the only time he focused on her was when he was curious why she won the Nobel Peace Prize. Donald Trump is Donald Trump. I don't think this is any new behavior. I think the fact that the Republican Party is still silent, they believe that this is just a normal behavior. And behind the sines, he might be freaking out, but I don't see this as anything new, sadly enough. And
then the Republicans with their rhetoric, I wanted to, this is a whole different topic. We didn't talk about it earlier today. We only have a few minutes left, but I want to get into it. Reverend Jeffers, who's Donald Trump's guy, the guy who talked about civil war and Trump retweeted him. He was on Fox News Radio yesterday with Todd Starnes, who's who lost his contributorship today on Fox News. I don't think it's because of this. I think maybe his contract was up. But in any event, he was talking about the Equality Act, which is essentially, folks, just equality. So you can't discriminate against someone for their sexual orientation or gender identity the same way you cannot discriminate on race or religion or ethnicity. That's all the law is. And listen to how you have this so-called Christian, Reverend Jeffers, who to me is nothing about you. If Jesus came back, he would just headbutt him or knee him on the groin. Here is clip number 12. No, 12, please.
This Equality Act that Nancy Pelosi and her cronies are after, I have no doubt that they want to especially go after and target Christians in America, Dr. Jeffers.
Oh, I believe that. I believe if the left ever gets in control again, it's not going to be incremental change we see. They have said they're going to undo everything this president has done. And think about what he has done in the pro-life area, the sweeping religious liberty executive order he signed. They are going to undo that, and they are going to come after conservatives with a vengeance.
The idea that equality for people who are gay or transgender is an attack on Christians, to me, is it not a perversion of Christianity? I mean, Jesus Christ was about caring for people in need, not persecuting them.
I'm convinced that these people are absolutely fucking miserable. Like, they spend so much of their time worrying about how other people are living their lives. As far as I'm concerned, if people aren't hurting kids, animals, or other adults that are not giving consent, mind your business. How is someone else being happy who they marry is inflicted or messing up your marriage? I just think they're miserable. I think they're not getting some. I think they're horrible individuals. And I think it bleeds into why so many Christian Americans and evangelicals support Donald Trump, is that they think he is their savior to actually getting all of these horrible policies that are going to actually impress more people.
It's so heartbreaking. But, younger people have turned away from faith and some who've stayed with faith have a very, very negative view of evangelical Christians. Of millennials, polls I've seen, I haven't looked in a year or so, of all the faith groups, it's not Muslims like older Republicans have a negative view of. It's evangelicals. And that it's the idea of hating for Jesus, which is so inconsistent with Christianity.
You should see The Family. Have you seen The Family on Netflix?
No, I should see
it.
It
is the creepiest shit you will ever figure. It's basically a very Christian group who are trying to take over the world.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with more of Jamira Burley right after this.
Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127. The Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Jamira Burley. Still here, not going anywhere. We've got about a minute left. So, Jamira, if people want to follow you, by the way, is Instagram or Twitter the best way? Or Tinder? What's the best way to follow Jamira Burley?
Definitely not on Tinder, but Instagram and I'm on Instagram or Twitter equally, and my username is the same for both, at Jamira Burley, JamiraBurley. Yeah, check me out all next week in the morning from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Think of me as your morning coffee, and we'll, kickstart your day.
Give her a call next week. Chat with Jamira.
The radio. Give me a call on the radio.
Yeah, not personally, but here's her cell number anyway. And last thing, I've been asking a lot of people this. How do you think the Trump presidency comes to an end?
I can't say what I want to say. I can't say what I want to say. I just hope it doesn't end with Mike Pence taking over. Right. That is some creepy shit.
And there's reporting tonight that he was pressured by Trump to talk to the Ukrainian leader on. I don't think he was pressured at all. So we might have a Speaker Pelosi as president, Nancy Pelosi, in the future. Jamira, thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks.
Thank you, Lauren and Matt. Thanks for tuning in, folks. I'm on Twitter at Dean Obidala, Facebook.com/Dean of Radio. Tomorrow, if all goes well, in the third hour, we're going to have a special on the Veterans Administration. Me and Matt are going to the VA here in Manhattan to interview administrators and some doctors to talk about the VA, what's going on there, and I look forward to that. So thank you for tuning in. Look forward to chatting with you tomorrow right here on the Dean Obidala Show, Sirius XM Progress 127.